Alright, I want to talk a little bit about how the bug out food cycle works for survival situations. Okay, got one of my bug out packs here. Actually, I have several set up for different vehicles, different situations. This is one I usually just keep at a house on. It's a grab and go thing. Different one stays in the vehicle. Part of it is I got some of my better gear on this one. I don't necessarily keep my higher end stuff in the vehicle, but it's one of them. Okay, and it's also one that's got relatively generic stuff in it that I can toss to somebody if they need it. But decent little tack force brand bag, and patches go inside of it to keep it a little more neutral on the outside. But they're decent. It's Chinese made, but it's good gear. And I needed to get something this size, but you can see with all the stuff attached to the outside, I'm getting a little bit full. And I pulled some of the food out of it to show that when you're, and this is really for a vehicle mobile situation. So I've got this big handle on it that I expect to use that a lot more than a backpack strap. The only reason I would really be using the backpack straps on this would be if something really went wrong with a vehicle situation. I ended up on foot. And if I were to do that, I might end up rearranging a lot of the pouches. I might take the knife off the side of the pack, put it on my belt. That sort of thing. But I want to talk about the food cycle on this, because if you've really got a lot of useful stuff in your bug out pack, you don't have a lot of room for food. I mean, you're going to have some in there. It's a necessary part of the situation. And so this is like the food stuff that would go in a bug out pack. But we want to talk about your food situation in a cycle, because it does follow a certain cycle. And this would be stage 1, 2, 3 of your cycle on the survival situation, long-term disaster preparedness, or serious personal bug-out situation, something like that. Stage 1 is your normal grocery store food. Okay, chances are you already own it. I would suggest, unless you got a real major overeating problem, I don't know. I like food. I like to cook. I do make big meals. My roommates don't always eat it, so I end up making a big thing and then eating all of it. But for this weekend, I'm getting ready to do like a surf and turf steak dinner. And so we've got regular grocery store stuff in the fridge. If the electricity were to go out in the fridge, I kind of have a solar backup plan, but it's not fully built right now. So let's just assume that if the electricity were to go out, some disaster happens, the fridges turn off, I get a couple of days out of stuff that's frozen, and of course canned and regular stuff that that was made to go indefinitely to begin with. But you eat that stuff up first, and if you're going to bug out, there's a lot you're not going to be taking with you, so you might as well feast up. Remember that feasting up on a bug out situation before traveling is a time-honored and necessary tradition, generally speaking. You feast up before you travel because you're not taking it with you. And if everybody remembers the story of the Hobbit, the dwarves show up at Bilbo Baggins' place, they eat through all of his food storage and say, guess what, we're going on a trip. That's basically what you would do. I mean, you have your regular groceries, your regular pantry, you might as well just feast up. And when you've got a full stomach, that's when you can live on your traveling food. Okay, if you are on this stuff on an empty stomach, you are going to be one unhappy camper. So what I do if I'm going on, let's say, a 3-day trip or 3-day backpacking trip or something like that, on the way out, preferably the night before travel. We travel early in the morning. The night before travel, feast up on regular ordinary food. Get drunk, get full, get happy, feast up. You wake up in the morning, drink your coffee, have a good crap, and get rolling. And the first thing you're going to do while you're rolling, of course, is maybe go through a little bit of convenience food. That's how your survival food will go 2 or 3 days. If you rolled where you're hungry and starving to begin with, you're going to be behind the 8 ball. So that's where you got to understand the rest of what I'm going to talk about here. If you're going to talk about this thing being a day's supply of food, You can be a real unhappy camper unless you're already kind of feeling a little guilty over the fact that you pigged out somewhere. And just like Bilbo Baggins and the dwarves heading out for the big adventure, you have a really big feast before rolling, before heading out. So let's look at what you would get by with. And we've got limited space in a pack, right? MREs and stuff are what I call the transition. Because, yes, you can put a couple of MREs in a pack, but what happens is it's wet food, okay? And this isn't MREs, this is wet food, microwavable noodle thing, whatever. Can of sardines or something like that. But this is wet food. Wet food is heavy. Wet food is that transition between regular meals and convenience food when you're not necessarily all that cramped for space. The wet food is what you would have for vehicle travel. And when we talk about military operations, you're talking about people usually vehicle mobile. Okay, you get dropped off maybe for a mission for a day or two, but that's about it. If you're actually living out of your pack, you've got to go with all this ultra compact, dehydrated stuff. And that's where your choices get really limited. Okay, because you can go with a couple of days with the MREs. But preferably, if you are within 2 days travel, 3 days travel, and you're just concentrating on the travel, you under normal traffic conditions, you can get across the United States in 3 days. Under abnormal traffic conditions, obviously, it can take a hell of a lot longer than that, and you might end up on foot. The only reason traveling a significant distance in the United States is going to take more than 3 days is something messed up and you're traveling on foot. If you're traveling on foot, that means you got to watch the weight, or else you're going to end up having to ditch gear, okay, or ditch supplies. It's just the only way it goes. Unless you want to waste time stopping and using up your supplies. And you may do that for social reasons, social networking reasons, you may do that. So what are we looking at? Well, we're looking at freeze-dried food, mountain house type stuff. But again, when you're looking at the bulk of it, this isn't super dense. It's lightweight, but it's not super dense. And you're probably not quite going to do this every single meal. So this is where we get into these nutrition bars, lifeboat bars, Daytrex bars, Mayday bars, and energy supplements. Okay, USDA recommended stuff for vitamins, I believe, was set up for 150-pound people. Okay, I'm nearly twice that, and I'm physically active, which means I burn off calories. I am not one of these obese, non-physically active, overweight people. I'm very physically active, and I burn a lot of calories. So what somebody else calls a one-day ration for me is not going to cut it. Okay. I'm going to require more food, and so what happens is I'm going to come up with a meal plan that involves these things for the between meal type stuff. These are your energy bar type things, but these are very specific to survival. And one of the reasons these are going to be different from, let's say, your power bar, energy bar stuff, which I don't show here because a lot of times I go through those, is that they're very high in the vitamin content. Okay. They're pretty high in the vitamin content. The protein content's kind of normal, so I would supplement this with some protein bars. I got to go buy some. The other thing is, of course, your B vitamins and your stuff comes in these energy drinks. One of these is definitely equal to having a couple of cups of coffee, as far as usually caffeine or something a hell of a lot like caffeine in it. These I highly recommend for the mobile packs. Highly recommend it. As far as any particular brands on these lifeboat bar type stuff, I don't really, I can barely tell the difference, and I would just say go for some variety. If you go for some variety, it kind of helps a little bit. So I'm not going to say have a major favorite. Daytrex is usually something you're going to be able to get mail order, Amazon.com, and from some of the boater supply places, because that's kind of one of the Coast Guard things for going in the boats. Mayday Bar is something that Portland Survival Center, which is a survival-oriented store, they have at really competitive prices. I'm going to do a little bit separate review on that But generally speaking, what you're going to do is, let's say one of these is a breakfast bar. I would add some protein bars or something like that for a lunch. And then a real meal at least once a day of this type of stuff. And again, if you're a larger physically active person and it says this serves 2 people, no it doesn't. Okay, you need to consider that it's what your serving size is. Try going a day on this stuff, and you might find yourself just going through the whole damn supply. And I mean, I could easily go for almost half of this in one day on my normal physical activity. But remember, if we're traveling and we pigged out before heading out, you had your pre-adventure feast. Just think about Bilbo Baggins and the dwarves, how they did it. If that's the way it's done, then that's what you do. And that way you're not packing super heavy stuff in your pack. And again, of course, just like the Hobbits do, they had the magic elf cookies. That's pretty much what this is. Okay, these are your Hobbit magic elf cookies. Not the most wonderful stuff to live on, but it can work, you know. And there you are. So what would I do for bug out bag food? Just this stuff. But for an actual bug out situation, pig out, and then grab some of your convenience wet food, your lunch food, that kind of stuff. I have a separate bag I'll keep in the truck with convenience wet food, and go through this stuff before you hit up on this stuff. And because once you're in a serious long-term shit hit the fan type situation, it may be extremely difficult to even produce this stuff. And so this is something you break into only when you're relatively desperate.